We should do the entire podcast about shoes today. I hear you guys talking about shoes.
Yes, I'm always good for a $15 holler shoe.
Amen, sister.
Long, but...
Amen.
We got a lot to talk about today, so we don't have time to talk about shoes.
Okay.
Wow,
Sorry, guys.
wow,
Sorry.
wow.
We're going to chop it up about last night's episode of This Is Us.
Yeah.
We're also going to find out, which you didn't see it, so this isn't going to mean anything to you, but we're going to find out if we would have been drafted. Yeah. I'll tell you all about that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
I'll tell you
assuming
about
we're
that.
not talking about football either.
Wait, you saw it, right? Did you
Yeah.
watch last night's episode?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure. We're going to talk a little deeper about A Star Is Born. I know we already did last week, and I think we did the week before that. I think we talked about it.
We kind of like it.
Yeah, we kind of do. And you haven't seen A Star Is Born, right?
Nope, but I know the general synopsis.
It's about death.
Yeah, someone dies.
Right.
It's going to be dark today.
We're going to talk a little bit about that, mainly because April finally saw it.
Gosh.
Stop right there.
Okay.
Stop right there.
All right. We're not going any further.
We also have a very special guest with us that we're going to talk to coming up here in the Totally Spoiled podcast.
Woo, woo.
Episode 34 brought to you by Samson Go Mic, which, by the way, we've got new mics here in the studio. I don't know if you noticed.
They look different and felt different. That's cool. Should I still talk up close?
You
to
don't have to do
What?
that.
It just feels
Why
natural.
do you do that
Stop
every
judging
time?
me. Stop judging me.
Thank
Just
you
let it
to
happen.
Samson for hooking us up with the mics. By the way, they
Yeah.
also hooked us up with the Samson Go mic, which is, I don't know if you saw it. I had a broadcast at Busch Gardens, and I did a Facebook Live.
Yes!
And I had like little lavalier mics. This thing is so cool. It's a Samson Go mic. What it is
Right
you
on.
attach this box onto your phone.
Uh-huh.
So you don't even need like video cameras anymore. Like literally you just need your phone. You attach this box on and you get mic sounding quality instead of the
I like
crappy
it.
like phone quality. Like if you're like filming from, let's say, like 50 yards away, and you know how it would sound like echoing. Yeah. This is like mic quality. It's amazing.
Crisp and clear.
It's amazing.
Beautiful.
So thank you so much to Samson. Create your own podcast or take your social videos to the next level with the Samson Go mic. Let's do some spoiling.
Woo! Let's do it. Let's do it.
At Brian Fink, at April on Air, thank you so much for subscribing to and following the Totally Spoiled podcast. Like I said, we've got a very special guest with us today here in the podcast.
I am special.
And the reason Audrey is with us today is... Oh, was I allowed to say your name?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to...
Fine.
And it's not like we're videoing for YouTube or anything. We could have had your
Samantha,
face
where's the
blurred.
brown paper bag? We can't say her name. We can't say her face. Show it much less. But we can
Not
talk about
really
shoes.
So we talked about... Was it last week that we talked about this? Or
Yes.
the week before?
Yes.
About how Randall... And you know, you watch enough of This Is Us to know the characters, right?
Yes.
So Randall, one of the things that I kind of get the feeling is that a lot of his life revolves around the fact that he... Excuse me. My God.
There.
Holy crap. Well,
That's why I don't watch the show. It chokes people up.
Like-
So emotional.
like we literally had probably the most hits out of our YouTube ever as I choked live. Hold on.
Audrey, I see where you're going with this. Might not be such a bad idea. It kind of does things to you.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Where was I before I choked my life up?
About Randall.
Yeah, so Randall, I kind of feel like his life revolves around being adopted.
Right.
A lot of the decisions he makes in life, a lot of the things that he does, he's almost constantly bringing up adoption and the fact that he was adopted.
Right.
So you had mentioned that somebody here in the building was adopted.
Correct.
And it turns out that Audrey.
I am.
So I kind of wanted to get a feel. And this could be as short as you want. This could be as long as you want. I kind of just want to have the platform to understand adoption.
Okay.
Because what I don't want to happen, and we kind of had this last week where I was like, well, I don't want to make any comments to seem rude or to seem callous, but I don't necessarily understand what it's like to be adopted. So did you know at a young age that you were adopted?
Yes. Always know. My mom told me from
Right in the beginning.
day one, yes.
And was it something that, did you find that it changed your life? Did you find
bit.
that your life revolved around it?
No, not necessarily, because I don't tell a lot of people that I'm adopted because it's not that big of a deal to me. I've always been with my family. I've been adopted since I was 8 days old. So it's all I've known. It's nothing new to me. And I don't outwardly tell people that I'm adopted unless it comes up in a conversation. Like April heard because someone else was talking about it, their opinion on it. And I said, that's not true. I'm adopted and, so-and-so.
So you don't really bring it up because to you, that's your life. I mean, you really didn't know life before adoption.
Nope.
So have you at any point tried to find your biological parents?
Oh, I know.
Oh, you know them?
Yeah.
Oh, so if you don't mind me asking, and feel free to shut me down, what was the situation?
Well, so my mom, my adoptive mom, who's my mom, she knew my birth mother and her family through church, and my mom's a teacher, so I think she may have taught my birth mother. So when she became pregnant, I think it was already set up for her to give me to my mom.
Gotcha.
She had already had 3 children previously, and then she had 3 after me. So she really wasn't in a situation to keep a child. She was on drugs. I think a little hookering.
Oh, wow.
So, I was blessed to not be left with her and went to my mother, who gave me a fantastic lifestyle. So it was always open to me, and my birth mother's aunt went to the same church as us. So growing up, I saw her. When we moved back to Minnesota, I saw her pretty often, and that's when I had a chance to finally meet my birth mother. She called me one day. I was in middle school and said she wanted to meet. So
out of the blue?
Out of the blue.
Oh, wow.
So we met at her mother's house, who is my birth grandmother, and there's only one thing that I wanted to know, because I pretty much knew everything else as far as the history, and what it was is I wanted to know who my father was. And she said she didn't know. She couldn't remember. So after that, I was done. Like, well, I don't have anything left to say to you.
So it's kind of the same situation with This Is Us, because Randall was adopted at birth.
Very
so
early.
You said yours was 8 days after.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's pretty much the same situation. In This Is Us, Randall has this moment where when he finds his biological dad, he has this huge speech about, I don't need you. I just wanted you to see how good I turned out, how I'm fine without. Did you have that moment?
No, because I was young. I was in middle school, and then he also moved his dad into his house afterwards, and I'm not doing all that. No,
Right.
Like, I feel some type of way about my own situation. I feel a little left out because I was the only one out of all her children to be adopted outside of the family. The rest of them, she kept the ones after me, and then the 3 before me, the first one went with his father. The second one went with the grandmother.
Wow.
The third one went with the aunt that was at our church. So I was the only one that was adopted outside.
Technically
the family.
outside of blood.
Yeah. So
Yeah. It's
I see not all of the children, but most of my siblings on Facebook. I'll chit chat with them here and there, like a post or something. But
Like a
that's
Facebook
it.
friend
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah, it's hard for me to have or want to have a deeper relationship with them.
Because you've
Yeah.
got your own family.
Yeah, I have my
It's a very similar situation. I think I talked to you about this, Audrey. I think maybe to you, Brian, too. When I first moved to North Carolina, definitely didn't raise, but by all means, throughout middle school and high school, my neighbors had adopted a little boy from Guatemala, Andre, who I took on like my little brother. And one of the best things they could have done, which is what they did with you, Audrey, is educate you and tell you, hey, this is your history, this is who you are, but you are my child. And to me, and you hear people say this all the time, you can't always, or better off said, you don't choose who your blood family is, but you can choose who your family is through association.
Right.
Blood isn't everything. There's people today, and I think we all come from families, no matter how much we portray to have an amazing family or lack thereof, we all have family drama and issues. And blood doesn't define always family.
Absolutely.
And with Andre, it's so funny because I say had him because he's like my brother since he was 2-3 years old, and it's crazy now that he's in high school, and I still talk to him every day, and he's got another brother from the mother, and he doesn't think twice about how he answers of, oh, that's my mom, or that's, my adoptive mom or stepmom, or that's my adopted brother or, half brother or whatever. It's your family. There's not a difference. And I think a lot of it has to do, and we see this kind of through Audrey's example, and then also her upbringing in her life, and then you see how it's different for Randall. And one conversation I've heard, or I've had in discussion with other relatives or family or friends, is adopting as an only child, and that being the only child, or adopting and then being adopted into a family with other siblings, and that sometimes can play a different role. With remind me, Audrey, so you have siblings from your biological mother, from your adoptive mother. Did you have siblings as well? Or
yes. So my adoptive mother, she adopted me when she was 46, and she had previously already had 2 children.
But they were grown.
Yeah, like
and
15 and 18.
Okay.
My oldest brother, he was on his way off to college by the time I
Gotcha.
came around. So, I wasn't the only adopted child, though.
Yeah.
She had also adopted 3 more,
Wow.
but they were older.
What an amazing woman.
She
Yeah.
was into foster care, so she always kept kids. She was an educator. She loved children. So
Right.
she had foster children, and then she adopted 3 more children,
awesome.
I think, after me.
Yeah.
But she had them. It was just before it became legal, a legal adoption. It was after my point. But one of them didn't work out. So it is a risk adopting older children. We had to let him go because he just wasn't blending in well
Right.
with the
Gotcha.
family mesh.
I was going to say, was it just a matter of him not getting along, or a situation which I've also heard where the biological parents want to take the child back in, but from a
No,
legal perspective, it
was a sad situation for him. Like, just
Okay.
mentally, he had some issues.
I gotcha.
Probably a lot of anger issues. I don't really know what he witnessed as a child before he was moved into
Right.
foster care. But it's funny because he randomly reached out to me about a year ago.
Really?
And I haven't spoken to him or seen him or had any relationship with him since I was a child when he left us.
Mhm.
And again, I'm like, I don't want to talk to you. I'm feeling very weird now. How did you get my information? You found me online. It's creeping me out. So I guess I'm just a close-knit type of people.
Right.
And if you're not with me, you're not with me. So
It's a comfortability thing. And
yeah.
that's a great example, too, of how every situation is different. There are some amazing adoptive stories. I think I told you, if it's in the books for me, just because I've been around so many families that have done adoption or have been adopted, that it's something I've considered for myself. And that's a great example of how you're a wonderful example of how there's no difference. You're my family, period. I don't look at it in any other way. And it's because that's your family, period. Or in a situation like, I don't want to mention his name or whatnot, but like, who you're mentioning and how it didn't work out. And sometimes that has to do how early or late in the adoption process that
and the state
happens,
of the child,
and the
too.
state,
Yeah,
exactly,
absolutely.
their
What that child
history.
has witnessed and gone
Absolutely.
through.
And that's understandable.
And like you said, I think it is a situation where everybody is different.
Right.
And yours was a situation where you were adopted young, so you were able to pretty much have your entire life.
That's all I knew.
Exactly.
That was my mom. There is no
That
other
is.
mom. There's another lady that may have birthed me, but she's my
Absolutely.
And just to kind of circle back around to This Is Us, your situation is kind of the way I thought of it, where to me it's kind of weird to let it revolve your life or to have your life revolve around
Right.
it. It is a situation where obviously you're trying to get everything set, but you've got a family.
But remind me, like with Randall's situation, did he know about?
He didn't. So he
I think
found
that's
his,
the problem.
and that's what I'm saying. So you found your biological young. His was when he was already an adult. So he's got years of stuff to deal with.
But he also knew from the get-go that he was adopted.
He knew
Is
he
that
was
what you're
adopted,
asking?
but he didn't
He didn't-
know who his biological was.
Or-
Right.
yeah.
So the
Okay.
adoptive parents kept that from him, and I think that's a major problem and
Yeah.
a mistake when you go into adoption, whether you're the person giving your child up for adoption or you're the one adopting it. Don't what is it that they do? They block the court records so that I can never go back and find.
I
information.
gotcha.
Like I was lucky where it was
That wasn't the
around-
case.
It was around me, but
Right.
for most children, they can't access.
There's
that
no option,
information.
right?
And I think that's a huge mistake on the parent and the adoptive parent to block that from their child.
I agree.
That child is going to grow up feeling some type of way, kind of like Randall is, and probably not feeling complete because they don't know.
And that's what the situation is.
Right.
You know, he kind of was always trying to fit in because obviously his family wasn't like him. So he was trying to figure out where he fit into all of it. What's crazy, though, when you talk about, records being blocked and everything, but now with like DNA type companies, it's a lot easier for people to find out, even if everything is locked up.
Well,
Right.
that's what I was going to bring up because, like I said, I don't know my father's side of the family, and I want to look into like the 23andMe or the Ancestry.com to see if I can find out anything out there because what I was told, I don't know if it's necessarily true. Like, we don't have to go into details.
Right.
But my adoptive mother, she told me that my father was a white Italian. So I always grew up loving Italian food. So I'm like, that's in me.
Does this make sense?
And I told April, like I teased her one day, I was like, I love cheese and I love Mexican food. So maybe, there's a little Mexican in me. Like I don't know. So
It's okay, girl. I'm gonna blend myself.
but
Add all
it's
of it.
serious.
Add
I
all of
don't
it.
know. And
Yeah.
I do want to look into that part because that is the tiny bit of me
I love it.
maybe
That's got the
incomplete.
curiosity.
Yeah.
The curiosity, yeah, I think that's the thing. It's just knowledge. Knowledge is power. People say that, and whether it's giving you a peace of mind or just, especially when it has to do with you and finding out more about yourself or your past, and every situation is different, but yet similar. Whether it's adoptive or losing a parent, you know this, or you both know. Even with my dad, it's crazy. I feel like I knew him more now, losing him, than I ever did when I was younger, and that goes on with Kevin too. Kevin,
Trying to find out everything
yeah,
about Jack.
it's like you had the opportunity when your dad was around. Why didn't you ever ask?
Right.
You don't know and you don't think about it. It's just knowing and finding more about yourself. And how do you do that? Through your parents, through your history. It's a great thing to know, and it's a good thing to explore. Doesn't necessarily define you, and it shouldn't.
Unless
so
you
much
like
in
Italian
your case,
food.
then maybe certain things correlate.
Right.
But yeah, it helps in identifying and just finding yourself, but it doesn't define you.
But I think one of the important things, which you touched on, is being honest. I
Yeah.
think adoptive parents need to not push that aside and be as honest as they can with the kid, because the kid is going to want to know stuff
Yeah.
as
Right.
they grow up.
And if you lie and then the child finds out as an
Forget
adult,
Yeah.
then
And that was kind of the situation,
You know?
because Mandy Moore, Rebecca lied about the whole situation.
Right.
And
Right.
he was angry when he found out.
He was
Yeah.
really angry
So
at her.
absolutely. Audrey, thank you so much
You're
for sharing your
welcome.
life story. I
Thanks for having me,
appreciate it.
guys.
Oh my God, what an incredible story.
I know.
Be careful as you're exiting
It
here.
was
I know
fun.
Katie tried doing it and it got a little loud. No, she didn't trip, but be careful. There's ugly wires here and everything.
You're like, I won't be the one to do that. You're the bestest, Audrey.
Audrey, thank you so much. So last night's episode of This Is Us was a very interesting episode because it was very different from what
Yeah.
they've done.
Can-
What did you think?
I was going to say, can I just say there were major parts I almost felt like I wasn't watching This Is
Absolutely.
Us. I'm
yeah.
like, oh my God, this is interesting. I liked it. I was just,
Really?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
going into it, I didn't know if I was going to like it because
Yeah,
going into it,
same.
I'm like, well, if I want to watch a war story, I could watch something on the History
plenty.
Channel or some other show.
Yeah.
This isn't. This is war. This is us.
And I think you'll agree with me, over 80% of it was just
The war.
him at war.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved it.
What did you love about it?
Well, so I like war movies.
No, me too.
Like Full Metal Jacket.
Saving
Incredible.
Private Ryan.
Yeah, I've actually never seen that with Tom Hanks, but I know it was an incredible movie. Okay.
Yeah, we don't need to go into
We don't need to
right
go
now.
into that.
Okay.
But Full Metal Jacket. Have you seen Full Metal Jacket?
Of course I have.
Okay, so I love war movies. I love This Is Us. I think last night was an incredible combination of the two because we got to see so much about Jack. Like, everything about Jack.
Yeah, it was neat seeing him in his older brother role.
Younger? Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I was like, Ikumi?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, seeing his role as an older brother and seeing how that mirrored his loving, caring ways as a father. That one scene where he grabs, I'm assuming it's one of his best friends who lost his leg, and like grabs him by the face.
It wasn't one of his best friends. It was just somebody that was in his platoon that had actually been in it longer. That was one of the discussions they had.
Their relationship seemed so... No, I remember because
Right.
he's like, I have to pay respects to you or something along the lines. He's like, I've been here double the amount you have and yada yada. Like,
and you're a sergeant now.
Brat talk. Straight brat talk.
Yeah, and when he got his foot blown off.
I guess when you're at war, I mean, that family bond just...
Absolutely.
is instant, so maybe that's why I thought that. But him, regardless, where he grabs his face,
The breathe. Oh man.
and then it flips to the page of him doing that to older version of Randall. I'm like,
yeah,
oh
it was.
my God.
Oh, that was so good seeing where he got that from. Just breathe.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yep.
God, that was amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, there was a lot that we learned. We learned about that. We learned that Jack had heart problems when he was a kid.
Yeah. Okay, this is what I was like, oh my God, please let not Brian rip me a new one and be like, no, April, that's not what it's about. Are you watching the show? Yes, I'm watching the show. Yes, I'm watching the show. When he died, it was because of a heart complication, or was it lung?
No,
I couldn't
it was heart.
remember.
No, it was heart.
Okay, good.
He had a heart attack.
Whew, good.
Right, which is crazy to know that he had heart problems when he was a kid, because then theoretically he died a long time ago.
Well, with that said, whether we want to phrase it that way or not, I definitely get where you're coming from. It almost makes me wonder if, because what happened, the house burning and that whole situation, it accelerated his heart rate, but it was an issue or illness that he was already dealing with early on. Probably never realized it, but it triggered the house burning, and the whole situation triggered that, which triggered his death.
Yeah, I mean,
Right?
it was all...
Was that intentional, you think?
What do you mean?
Like from the story writing, do you think that was intentional?
Oh, I think it was intentional to show that he had heart problems when he was a kid.
Yeah. Okay.
And to see how he dealt with it. And I mean, it's kind of interesting to know if they dealt with it on a medical level, or because they kind of like pawned it off.
I think it was just enough of a like.
Yeah, I mean, he used it to not get drafted or not have to go to war. Which was crazy to see him then like wanting to go to war just to look after his little brother.
My heart.
Could you imagine?
My heart.
So us guys are having to live up to this character of Jack and being amazing in relationships and a dad.
Not possible.
And now we have to live up to a man who is going to war just to look after his brother? What? No.
Because does he exist? Can you send him to 4002 West Candy Boulevard?
Put him in the mail.
I'm not going to put my personal address out there, but just put him in a box.
Put him in a box with no holes.
Have him pop out in front of my office, and let's call it happily ever after.
And just following up on the topic of what we've talked about in the past of Jack's dad being a piece of crap. What? But yeah, I was gonna comment about that. But first of all, he's a piece of crap for Nick gets drafted, goes home, is literally standing in front of his father to kind of be like a loving father. And what does his father say to him? Don't let me down. Make me proud. It's like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, can you be a dad? But then, yes, for about 5 minutes, I actually really like Jack's dad. In the hospital before Nick's born, and you see that, like, he's this loving dad who hasn't had a sip of alcohol yet.
And as Nick is born, because you see them looking into, what would you call that? Not the Nick, where they put the babies.
After they're born?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know enough to... I know what you're talking about. The incubation room? Is that
yes!
Is that right?
Good job!
Shut up! Wow! Okay.
Your cat daddy skills are coming into play in real life.
Well, that's where Aiden and Tucker were when I found them. They were in incubations.
We're gonna die.
All right, so go ahead.
I think you birthed him. We're not going there. We're not going there. So, yeah, the incubation room where you see Nick's in there, and Jack's dad is holding, like, toddler Jack. And he says like his only and or biggest responsibility in life
His
is
only
looking-
job is to
his
look after
only
him.
job is to look after his brother,
Which
he
so...
lives up to. He took that advice as a little guy, and you see like glimpses of where Jack got his tenderness. But then what happened to the dad?
Yeah, but then the dad
What
later on is
happened?
like, yeah, Nick can't take care of himself. It's like, dude, you told Jack to look after
Yeah.
him. You said that was his only job was to look after him, and now you're giving him crap for looking after him the way he does, like the whole Superman thing, and when they're
Yeah.
sitting on the steps
I
and
know.
with the glasses, that was so awesome. And then like when Nick wakes up and like goes in to stop the dad from yelling at the mom, and he takes his glasses off to be Superman. Oh, everything
Powerful scene.
about that was amazing. Now we need to know what turned Jack's dad into a piece of crap.
I hope they clarify on that, like maybe within the next show, because I think the next show would make sense to do that. Like, I don't think it needs to be dragged out, you know what I mean? But I think we should know, This Is Us, if you're watching, which you should.
Which they do.
Wink, wink.
Which
knock,
they listen
knock.
all the time to the Totally
Hello.
Spoiled
Yeah.
podcast. I mean, they just don't mention it.
I would like to know. I don't want it, like I said, I don't want it dragged out, but I would like to know what was that switch. Because he looked like such a number one dad.
Yeah, and
such a number one, like, yes, cheerleader, hoorah, like, go-to man.
and his dad actually tried to get him to drink, and he shut his dad down.
Mm-hmm.
So there's got to be that catalyst, which
Yeah.
the weird thing about the preview for next week is this whole episode was built around finding his brother at war,
Right.
and he finally does at the end. We see his brother, and he gives him that psycho look. But then in the previews, not one thing is mentioned about war or the
Right.
brother. Nothing.
Nothing.
It goes back to the storylines of normal This Is Us.
Right.
But here's what I know. So I tried watching the after show last night.
Okay.
Unfortunately, YouTube was down, and it
Oh,
was the Armageddon. But I did watch it this morning, so I don't really remember a lot of it because it was like 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
But
Jesus.
the writers were talking about how they've kind of built the seed of knowing what happened between Nick and Jack. So I think they are going to talk about it some more.
At some point.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be in it some more. So would we have been drafted? Do you think you would have been drafted with the whole lottery?
I mean, I hope my peanut allergy would have saved me from it.
I don't think a peanut allergy would have saved you from being
Are there
drafted.
a lot of peanuts out in, like,
I think
fields?
what would have saved you, though, is, if I'm not mistaken, women weren't drafted. I think it was just men
back then?
back then. Yeah.
When did that change? You're right. You're right.
Yeah, so that would have definitely
Don't get
saved you.
used to that.
But let's put that
at
aside.
Some point,
So there's a website where you can put in your birth date and see if you would have been drafted.
no way.
So my draft number would have been 29. I would have been drafted.
What?
And what's crazy is if I would have been born 2 days later, if I would have been born on March 4th, I wouldn't have been drafted. And it's the same situation like Nick. If he would have been born on the 19th, which he almost was, he was born, 5 minutes before the switch of
think
midnight,
so.
I think is what the time
I think
was?
so.
He wouldn't have been called. But because he was born on October 18th,
Oh,
he was called.
my God.
I would have been drafted.
That's
Isn't that crazy?
Like in real life.
In real life, if this was back in the 70s, I would have been drafted. So your birth date is November 24th?
Uh-huh.
You would not have been drafted. Your number was 230, so you would not have been called. Isn't that so crazy to think about?
How do they even determine that?
Because they know the dates that were called. Like they've got history. It's kept
And,
of what numbers were called, like they had last night. And my birth date
Interesting.
would have been called. And that's like crazy to
That's
think about.
chilling.
Like back then, I would have been sent off to war. Now, granted, I could have went back to Canada like they tried doing, because I am Canadian, so I I probably wouldn't have
Yes,
been
you are.
drafted. But that was amazing what they were trying to. Jack was like, "Listen, I'm gonna get you out of here. I'm gonna send you. We're gonna cross the border to Canada, and not have to worry about it." Yeah, and then Nick ends up going off to war. When Jack is sleeping, he ends up going off. But I loved the episode because of how much it delved into the character.
Into the past, which helps develop the character
Absolutely.
even more.
And we've seen in the past the big three.
Yeah.
We've seen their episodes.
Right.
So this gave us a chance to see Jack for who he is and his character.
I wonder if we'll be able to delve. I mean, because most of the major characters have been covered. If we're going to see this with Rebecca, we kind of have a
little,
not that far back, but I wonder if it's really fully necessary. But it would be interesting. But I definitely get what you're saying, and it's really neat to now see kind of the parents in their past, because you usually don't think about that. Like, even in my own, it's like, what did my mom do when I was my age?
Right.
What was
you start
she
thinking
doing?
About that?
Yeah, what was my dad doing?
And my dad was in the military.
My dad was too. My dad was actually in Vietnam. And all of my family, my brother, I might have mentioned this to you too earlier, that my brother and I were the first generation to actually not go to war.
Wow.
Even my stepbrother, which kind of we were talking about with Audrey, like, it's so weird to even say stepbrother because he is my brother.
Right.
He was from a different relationship or marriage from my mom. Even he went to war. He was in the Marines and served in Somalia back in the 90s. But my whole family, from uncles, dad, grandfather, great-grandfather, like, everyone, my brother and I were the first generation not to go. So even to get like this information that you pulled up and that I wouldn't have been drafted, that's so crazy.
And in the after show, Milo actually talks about taking a lot from his dad because his dad was drafted and was in Vietnam. Yeah, so he talked about how he was able to take a lot of that and use that, which
for his role,
I thought he did amazing. And he talked about,
I agree.
He talked about how exhausting it was because of how emotional it was. I mean, the scenes that he had to do were insane last night.
Yeah.
Like even carrying all the equipment through all of that.
For things you don't think about.
No, like I'm watching this like when they're walking and the one guy steps on the mine, or they almost step on the mine, but they find it. I'm like, how do you even avoid all of those?
What? Now, help me understand. What was he doing? So that one guy where he put that white pouch
He was blowing the mine up. That was a mine.
So that was another mine. Okay.
Yeah. And he had seen, and so they were detonating it so that they didn't step on it.
Okay.
But then when they're throwing the football and that guy, oh God,
brutal,
horrible. So an amazing episode, and
so
for next week, just touching on if we're going to learn a lot about the pasts of characters, it shows a little scene of Toby when he was young. So we're going to learn a lot about Toby when he was a kid, which is cool because I'm sure he's got an incredible childhood.
He is still like that mystery character that I can't quite figure out. Like, I like him, but I feel like there's so much more to him that still is left to be developed.
Oh, absolutely.
So
and I think we're going to do it.
This will be very neat and very interesting.
So we don't have much time, but let's talk about A Star is Born really quick. Because April finally went to see it. I went to see it for the second time because it is that good. And I'm torn, even just talking about it. It was so much better the second time.
Yeah.
It was really good the first time, but knowing the songs, knowing the story, knowing what to watch for, it was so good the second time. You should go back and watch it again.
On
$5 Tuesdays.
It's totally, hello. It's totally worth it. Yeah, I gotta say, which is kind of funny, on my drive here this morning, the Bradley Cooper song and Lady Gaga song were playing, and I was like, oh my God.
Oh, my God. I have literally, I think
the tears again.
There hasn't been a day that has gone by. I woke up this morning singing Shallow in my head.
Stop it!
Swear to God, I opened my eyes and Shallow was in my head.
Oh my God.
And then I think there hasn't been a day that's gone by since I saw it the first time that I haven't sung Maybe It's Time to Let the Old Ways Die. Oh my God. And Bradley Cooper actually spent 5 days a week for 6 months taking voice, piano, and guitar lessons for this role.
You told me about this before we went to see the movie, that
he sings.
Those scenes are his
That's all
voice.
Him. All him.
I was like, what?
All him. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Gaga,
and Lady
we
Gaga,
know.
Even then, I was not, and I think I told you this too, I was not the biggest Lady Gaga fan. After watching her not only act, which, mind blown, super impressed, mad respect, her singing.
Yeah.
It was,
yeah.
her singing was...
Next level.
It was not only next level, it was different from what you've seen her do mainstream, at least more of her past. And you'd even mentioned that a lot of this movie, or not a lot, more towards the middle end, kind of started turning into what her own life
and I take that back.
has been.
I take that back.
And I was going to ask, like, in how or what way, and so you're saying
I don't.
take
So
it back.
looking back, so the comment that I had made was that halfway through, when the characters switch and Gaga is kind of making it,
Yeah.
it kind of turns into the Lady Gaga story, and I didn't like that. I don't know why I was so bent on that the first time I saw it that it bothered me so much. Second time, it didn't bother me at all.
But it still was somewhat of a depiction of her life.
Well,
Sort
no,
of.
I don't know about... No, it's not her life at all. It's just... What I was talking about is how she's the star and she's a pop star and all that.
Okay,
That's what
okay,
I didn't
okay,
like
okay.
it centering on Lady Gaga's
I
character.
gotcha.
But I didn't have a problem with that at all.
On
What-
Allie.
What I thought was amazing was, like, for example, the first time she hits the stage and they sing Shallow together, watching her face as she's singing, because you know she's a superstar and she doesn't have this anymore.
Right.
But watching her fear, her nervousness, her
role.
oh my God, why are they clapping for me? Like, her innocence
Yeah.
as her character, I thought was amazing.
That's amazing acting. That's what that is. And that's why I say hands down, like, go girl.
And then
to
when
her
she
role.
hits the high note in Shallow, goosebumps.
Goosebumps.
Even like when we were watching it the second time.
I know.
Absolute goosebumps.
I know.
Something that was so funny that I read about was, you know, the champagne bottle popping on the private jet?
When she goes with her friend.
Right.
Mhm.
That wasn't supposed to happen. So,
Really?
yeah, so they were on the private jet, and they told them, the only thing you don't do is don't pop the champagne.
And they popped it.
And they popped it. And so their reaction, like their surprised reaction, was legit.
real life.
Yeah, because they weren't
that's
supposed to.
Hilarious.
I think because of whoever they whoever they rented the private jet from, that wasn't in the contract to pop the champagne
probably dirty
and
it up,
yeah,
or, like,
that
ruin,
wasn't
like-
part of it. So that was one thing was they weren't supposed to do.
That is great. Oopsies.
Now do you know? Now that you've seen it,
Yeah.
you've emotionalized over it. Do you see the one scene that I was talking about that literally broke my heart?
Well, I see now because we talked about it, and I feel like I was within that vicinity of it. What got me was maybe 2 minutes before your scene that you were talking about, where he's legit. I think he's contemplating actually going out
No.
to her show.
Nope.
You didn't think at any point.
Nope.
So what was the point in him moving the car?
Moving
out
the
of
truck. Yeah, no, he wasn't contemplating it at all. And he even so, me and my friend Kathy, who had seen it before, we were
Yeah.
talking about like all the foreshadowing in the movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, he wrote the song that's pretty much about killing yourself
Yeah,
because
when
it's
you
like
think about it,
I don't want to live
right?
anymore, or I don't want to love anymore after blah 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 blah. Anyways, and he hides it in the book, hoping that she's gonna find it after. So he had thought about it.
Oh my gosh.
Now, he had kind of straightened himself up, as you see when he got out of the treatment program.
Yeah.
He had straightened himself up. So I don't think that was really on his mind anymore until that shithead,
freaking record rep manager,
the agent, whatever
guy.
he is, yeah, until he put it back into his brain that, you know, that he was holding Gaga back. I think that's what kind of pushed him back to the depression. But yeah, he didn't have any plans of going to see her that night. So he backed the truck up to clear the space, took the drugs, so he was pretty much, you know, on another planet.
Not there.
And then the scene that I was talking about, that literally, like, I'm watching this scene build, and like when he starts walking with the belt, like my heart is breaking. Like I'm like no,
It's pounding.
this is horrible. But then the one scene where they show him hanging in the garage and the dog is on the outside. and the dog is trying to get in
Whimpering.
and then just lays down by
Whimpering. He
my
knew.
heart just broke. How do you and we talked about this.
Right.
And this is going to be a horrible thing to say. But how do you do that to a dog? Like that's thoughts beyond that. How do you do that to family members, and how do you do that to friends and everything?
Right.
But because I've only got the dog and my cats to think about, how do you do that knowing that this dog loves you so much?
This is obviously conversations on that we've had in previous.
Absolutely, with the whole Avicii thing in the past.
With previous Totally Spoiled episodes with Avicii with 13 Reasons Why. Yeah. And like I said, please don't scrutinize us, and we're, it's opinions. And with certain cases, even that we've dealt with, even within our industry and things you hear and that happen.
Just recently. Right, with a fellow, not direct coworker, but that many of us worked and, spoke with.
How do you go about not only thinking, but actively acting on killing yourself? It's suicide.
And again.
And sorry to interrupt, but just in that sense that I was speaking to another friend of mine that had gone through a very similar situation, had these thoughts, didn't go through with it, very similar fashion. And because we're so close, I was comfortable enough to ask these tough questions, as in, for a second, did you not think about your pain and think about all those other people that loved you and what you would cause for them? And this is something that this sounds really direct to say, but one and done, you're done. Other people that love you are going to have to live with this forever. And you not being there and having to experience that, whether seeing it or knowing about it, and whether there's any guilt associated with it or the what ifs associated with it.
And what did they say?
And she said, that's why I didn't.
Wow.
That's why I didn't.
And I think when you...
And it was because of her little sister. Not even mom, not even dad, not a significant other, which was pain that she was going through. And I was like, you should never let something or someone affect you that bad to want to take your own life away, which is so precious.
But I think
it's
you
heavy.
Get to a point, and like, for example, in Jackson's situation, he took the pills to the point where he was gone and he wasn't even thinking about anything anymore and didn't have to worry about that. But I think when you're that low, it's just and again, I am in no way promoting it, but I think when you get into that situation, it's just a release. And it's just a way of escaping.
Your mind,
yeah,
good or bad or
is just getting
going.
past the pain, and the pain is so deep that this is your way of escaping.
Here's a question though, and I had this conversation with my friend as well when we turned the conversation away from her and her situation. When people many times, not everyone, associate a context or reasoning to suicide, many people say it's selfish. We talked about that and, took a poll even when we were dissecting 13 Reasons Why. It was very selfish of her. What would you argue or say in this case with A Star Is Born? Was he doing it because he was selfish, or was it selfless in the sense that he wanted Allie, who played the role of Lady Gaga, Allie's career to blossom? Because for those that haven't seen it yet, to give you a very, very short synopsis, he really ruined her Grammy moment. Really ruined it. I don't want to spoil
well, no, hopefully you've seen it. I mean, he gets
really,
trashed. He embarrasses her on stage.
Yeah.
He urinates.
Totally ruins it.
Right.
Totally ruins it, which leads on to the record rep guys saying, you have ruined her career.
Right.
And for it to be built back up, it's going to take a hell of a lot. So was it selfless of him in the sense that he loved her so much, though he was looking at it possibly in the wrong way, that he was going to give up who he was and what he had with her for her career? Because he knew how much that meant to her as well. But then again, doesn't love and doesn't the bond of a relationship carry above any title, any money, anything.
Well, I think the problem is that
know?
I think
How do you look at
he had so many demons from the way he grew up that it was so deep within him that he was definitely in his mind being selfless. He was
I think
stepping
so.
out of the way
I think so
and
too.
allowing her to flourish. I think the problem is that instead of somebody doing it in a different way, maybe leaving her or maybe saying, I think, we need to go our own way. I think we need to separate. His depression and his demons were so
Overtook.
deep that was his way of escaping. That was the only way that he knew how, because like he talked about when he was in therapy, he tried doing it when he was 13 years old. I mean, that was
Right.
already ingrained in him.
Right.
So I honestly think that, yes, in his head, he was being selfless,
Yeah.
but that is not the way to do it. And I think I told the story in the past of I watched this little documentary about this guy who attempted suicide, and he tried jumping off, if I'm not mistaken, a bridge in San Francisco, I want to say. And he said that going into it, he had his mind set. That was it. That was the only way out. That was the only way to do it. And he said that when he jumped over, the first thought was, this was the biggest mistake of my life. And he wanted to take back that moment.
When he jumped?
After he jumped.
But he
said
survived.
He survived. He landed. He broke like all kinds of bones in his body. And he's alive.
Oh, my gosh.
But he said the moment he let go of that bridge, the first thought in his head was, this is the biggest mistake of my life.
Oh.
And so I just hope that that's something that gets across, is that there's not always looking back. And people who have survived realize that is not the way to do it. That is not the way to do it. And we've talked about it, ad nauseum, but for a reason, that if you're going through stuff, just talk to somebody. Just talk to somebody.
There's always someone. At least
just talk to somebody.
Someone.
Absolutely. Or, again, you could text anonymously to the number. And, just talk to somebody, because that is not the way to go. But that movie, I could watch that movie
again
and again, with it being even as emotional. And something that you're probably going to notice, which I don't know if it was meant to, I'm thinking it was foreshadowing.
Okay.
When he gets in the limo, like right at the beginning, after performing, they pass a billboard that's got nooses on it.
Yes.
And I'm like, holy crap, I did not see that the first time that I was watching.
I did. And because I already knew what happened, because you told me from last episode, because I didn't know anything about the show. I found out that there was an older version of A Star is Born.
This is the fourth incarnation of it.
Well, there you go. See,
yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't know anything going into this. Didn't see the trailer. I knew what you told me and what we talked about the week prior. But knowing that and going into that already, that at the end he was going to die, I noticed that immediately. And one thing I noticed, even though I knew it wasn't going to be the, oh my God, moment, and maybe it was just like, I guess, just for, the corporation we work for too. Was it me, or did you notice the iHeart logo as well?
Yeah, I mean, that was a little product placement.
That was a plug, right?
Yeah,
that was a little plug, a little product placement.
Lady Gaga, when she was doing
so
one of her early performances, was in our iHeart Theater, I'm guessing, in L.A.
In L.A.
Is I'm thinking of where it was. But yeah, when I saw that, I'm like, hey,
yeah,
iHeart!
I was like, I'm not going to be the person that talks during the movies, but I was this close to pulling a nug on you. I was like, did you see that too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
That was product placement.
Yeah, of course.
So if you haven't seen A Star is Born, I mean, there's really no reason to at this point, because we totally spoiled it.
We told you
but
everything.
You have to watch it. It is the best movie of the year. I said it on Twitter. I said it on Facebook. If Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper don't win Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Movie, if they don't win Grammys for the soundtrack, then just shut the industry down.
Shut it down.
Because they deserve every award possible.
And let me tell you, I can be a harsh critic. And
you didn't like Gaga going into it.
And I was not that I didn't like her, I just wasn't her biggest fan.
Right.
Yeah, and I have a newfound respect for her professionally, vocally, acting wise, she blew it out of the
Absolutely
How do
amazing.
you say that in English?
Blew it out of the water?
Hizo tremendo. Sí, eso.
Blew it out of the water?
Yes, that thing.
I
That
think
thing.
we blew
Amazing.
this episode of the Totally Spoiled podcast out of the water.
Yes!
At Brian Fink, at April on air. Thank you for listening to the extended version of the Totally Spoiled podcast. Remember, follow and subscribe so that anytime there's a new episode, it'll let you know. And have an amazing rest of your week. This was awesome.
Yes.